Hello, hello. I'm so glad you stopped by to take a few minutes to watch, listen to a little bit more of what I have to say. Today, I want to talk about religious trauma syndrome. Not very long, just a quick video. A lot of people ask, like, is it real? A lot of people actually are just almost in disbelief because how could something, a place, an entity that is supposed to be safe and healthy and community oriented and our family, a place that's supposed to nurture us and help us grow, how can it be so destructive and abusive that there's actually a trauma named after it? Um, and it's real. It really is. My story, it took me many, many years to actually um, even recognize that I was in an abusive situation within my church. And not one church entity, but several. And just, I don't know, a few years ago, there was actually like a name put to it, and I could recognize that and begin my healing journey. And now I get to help others recognize and guide them through their healing journey. So, what is religious trauma syndrome? Um, there's a lot of different signs and symptoms. And one of the biggest ones and the most common that I come across, and also it seems to be very subtle, is difficulty making decisions. And that is also one of the most damaging, because when someone is not able to make decisions without having the advice of somebody else, they're not trusting themselves. They don't trust their gut. They don't trust their discernment. They don't trust that they have enough common sense, that they're worthy enough, that they're capable, that they have enough value, um, that they're smart enough. I mean, there's just so much beneath that whole thing of just difficulty making decisions, and that is so sad to me, because that's actually one of the things that I still find myself struggling with years later, is bigger decisions, or when I do make a decision, sometimes it is just, it's like a horrendous thing for me. And I have the guilt after did I make the right decision? What if I made the wrong decision? And it can just be this like almost tormenting experience for me when it comes to like bigger decisions. And, before all of this, that wasn't so. I made up my mind pretty quick and I just went for it. And now sometimes just the smallest ones, I'm like, oh, should I do that or shouldn't I do that? And I'll, mull it over for a couple of days, when really I could have made the decision just, in a matter of minutes. And so that is like one of the most common, and it can be a very subtle. A lot of people are not going to attach that to any kind of a syndrome or trauma, anything like that, because it's labeled as like, oh, just having a hard time focusing, or, I didn't get enough sleep, or this or that. We can just continue to sort of excuse it off, so to speak. But that leads me to another one, which is difficulty sleeping. And again, these are not necessarily like, just really in your face signs and symptoms, especially for women, because hormonal changes, they can definitely disturb our sleep. Or if you're a mom and you still have children at home, then you don't sleep as sound as you did before, because, there's just that underlying thing. Kids wake up sick in the middle of the night, things happen. And so, and then men, are under more stress today than before, and men are also experiencing a lot of hormone imbalances as well. So again, we can sort of kind of explain it away, or give it another label or something. But difficulty sleeping is definitely one of those signs and symptoms. Anxiety, panic attacks, that can also be a symptom of religious trauma syndrome. If you had underlying anxiety before, it would mean like it would be elevated, or maybe before you didn't really have panic attacks and now you do. Maybe as soon as you turn the corner towards your church, you get in that church parking lot and you start to suddenly have anxiety, or your heart starts to race or something. That is also a sign. Grief, you just feel sad. There's just this overwhelming sense of grief. And then with that comes the irritability, the anger. There's a whole host of grief symptoms attached to that as well, because there's something you've lost, you've suffered a loss. Whenever there's trauma and abuse, their grief comes into play because of that, because you're losing something. You're losing, it's almost like a sense of a part of who you were before. You're losing that. And then there's also loss of, friendships or people we thought were friends, the community, losing, if you're a part of a bigger church, or if you're a part of a church and you consider them your family, and it was for any length of time, then yes, you're going to grieve when you discover that you have been abused and that you have trauma issues from that, and you walk away from that, and there is loss of friendships, relationships. There's the rupture of relationship, and that, which is another one, because there's just all of these emotions into play. A lot of different emotions come into play, and even marriages have ended. Long time friendships have ended, and that can also be a sign, a symptom of it. Guilt, just underlying sense of feeling guilty about many things, just frequently. And this can even wake you up at night. You wake up and you just have this underlying sense of guilt going on, or anxiety, stress, identity confusion. Like, who am I? When you are wrapped up in a church, and that is sort of, it can become your identity in a sense. And for me, I know there was a period of time where anytime the doors were open, I was expected to be there. And it wasn't like, Heather, we expect you to come. It was just, the doors were open, you should be there. And so I was. And if I didn't go, then there was this huge amount of guilt. But because that became my life, so to speak, and my identity, then when I woke up one day and I'm like, who am I? Who am I? And then when I left, I didn't know who I was, what I liked, what I didn't like, what life outside in the real world was like, so to speak. And so having to heal and learn all of that again, and just discover different parts, that self-discovery. So you can really just get confused about who you are, and just that whole it's like confusion is like a huge symptom and sign of religious trauma syndrome, because there's just that constant underlying confusion about which way is up. Did I do the right thing? Did I not do the right thing? Guilt and shame. It's just like an overbearing sense of that. And then another one, and this will be the last one that I touch on for today, is kind of lack of meaning. Like, well, why am I here? Because, your identity has sort of been stripped away. You're not able to really trust yourself. Your gut instincts, one of the first things that typically happens is things that are said, subtleties, get you to not trust yourself, not trust your judgment. Having to constantly go to them for any kind of approval. Usually you get disapproval and lack of validation, a whole host of other things that come along with the abuse that goes on in these churches and with church leadership and things. So really, you're just like, why am I? There's this lack of meaning, like purpose, and um, why am I here? And there's shame, and there's just so many different things wrapped up in this whole religious trauma syndrome, and that trauma, and then physical things too in your body. There's oftentimes um, pains and even diseases can set in because of that, because your body will store the trauma. And so there's just this like lack of meaning, and again, the confusion, the underlying confusion. So I hope that helps you in some way. And of course, there is more. I'll do a few other videos on religious trauma syndrome in the future, but I wanted to just kind of keep this a little bit on the shorter side. And if you have any questions, then you can post them below. I also have a free gift that I offer through my website, which is 5 signs that you could be experiencing church trauma. And most people don't even know about these, and yet they are very prevalent. So there's a link down below in the comment section. Head on over and get that. Subscribe, like, share, say hi, and I will see you soon. Love you. Be at peace, joy, and all things happy and love.